And I'll let y'all deal with that. So welcome to class. Welcome to Friday. I thought that we would do, so if any of you were in class on Wednesday, this class is similar. But since we have more time on Fridays, it should feel a little different. The poses that the class I have planned has a lot to do with, I guess you could call it opposites. But more specifically, yoga teaches us to turn inward, right? Yoga teaches us to sense into what our body is telling us. And when we do that, sometimes we can get a message we're not prepared for, or we're just surprised by, or we might decide we're going to ignore it. So taking into account all of that all being true, I want you today to pay particular attention. I think you all do this anyway, but I want you to pay particular attention. I'll be giving you choices of turning inward versus turning outward. So, you know, in yoga, we talk about poses being chest openers or hip openers, shoulder openers. So whatever that, however you define an opener, let's sort of narrow down that description as it's more of a receiving, right? It's a receiving or a willingness to be, like, maybe exposed is the word. And so if there is an opposite of that, we don't often talk about the opposite of those openers in a positive way, but I would like to talk about that in a really positive way, because the human instinct to curl inward in self-protection is important. So it's the opposite of a chest opener, opposite of a hip opener. So take the choice and stay where you want to be as I offer different versions of a pose. So understanding that your body will tell you what's appropriate. And you can decide to follow that message or explore the opposite of the message, right? So sometimes the message is habit or based in something not rational, like maybe you don't want to do a chest opener because there's some sort of fear. But if you're in a safe environment, maybe the fear isn't the issue in the moment, right? Not discounting fear, but maybe in the moment it would be okay to do. Please choose according to what you want and according to what your body is telling you, according to what you're deciding, what you're willing to do today. So that being said, find a comfortable position, sitting, lying down, whatever you want to do. We'll do some breathing for a few minutes. So however you like to breathe, hopefully you breathe in all positions, but however you would like to spend some time noticing your breath. And as you're getting set up, I'll just talk about the idea that when you have a pranayama practice, a practice where you're watching your breath or you're studying and playing with your breath, the muscles in this part of the body, so the hip extends, the muscles that pull the thigh up into the chest, like the psoas muscle, they're directly attached to the diaphragm, which is how we breathe. The diaphragm is that muscle that makes space for the lungs, helps the lungs pull air in, right? And it moves in this direction up and down the torso. So if the psoas is pulling on the diaphragm, then breath is not quite as easy. So that's why often a teacher will have you lie on your back with your knees bent, because that's when this muscle has some slack. So if you've chosen to sit upright, feel into the idea of that. I'm not saying you need to lie down. I'm just saying feel into the idea of the freedom that your diaphragm has. And so that being said, go ahead and turn your attention inward, eyes open or closed, you decide. Let the gaze be soft, however. So if eyes are open, let there be minimal effort in focusing. And taking this first couple of moments to simply observe what the breath is doing. Breath is a reflection of your current state of being. And often it takes a little bit of time for the breath to catch up to the current state of being. Like if you were very active a few minutes ago, your breath might still be trying to catch up to this more still, less active state. So allowing for that. And maybe that's interesting to watch. Just noticing where the breath is obvious, where you can feel it. And feeling the breath could simply be that flow of an air current. And feeling the breath could also be movement within the body somewhere. And as you watch your breath, maybe you can dissect what you find, as in noticing where and when there is an inhale. And where and when there is an exhale. And noticing those two big parts of the breath, what we think of as the main aspects of breath. In between the in and the out, sometimes there can be a pause as the breath turns toward its next phase. And just like the length of the inhale or the exhale, the pauses change in length also. The pauses can be brief, the pauses can be long. Just watching this and dissecting this breath. Each breath has multiple sides. Inhale and pause. Exhale and pause. And understanding that this pattern and rhythm will be unique to you. Unique to this moment. And then if it feels like a good idea, begin to lengthen the inhale and the exhale. So not doing anything with the pauses, but rather allowing the in-breath and the out-breath to be slightly longer. Asking the inhale to be slightly longer, the exhale slightly longer. And maybe as you study and observe and follow your breath this closely, maybe the inhale and the exhale can be the same length. And maybe you can count that, some kind of count in your head. Maybe that's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. Doesn't matter the length. It's playing with the idea of equal in and equal out breath. And depending on how that's feeling, you could explore adding in the pauses so that the pauses between in and out are also the same length. So if your inhale is a count of 3, pause for 3, exhale for 3, pause for 3, and back again. And whatever that number is that you arrive at, maybe that number is longer. Inhale, 2, 3, 4, pause, 2, 3, 4, exhale, 2, 3, 4, pause, 2, 3, 4. And if you haven't already, go ahead and let go of that control of the breath. Allow the breath to return on its own to something that the breath wants to do without the input of your frontal lobe. The breath is controlled by a little place deep inside the brain that we don't need to watch or monitor. It knows how much breath you need. And so we can, as humans, we can override that breath for a little bit of time. We can override that part of the brain. So allow the breath to return to something that's not being controlled by you, even though it's being controlled by you. So whenever you're ready, take your time and come up to standing. We'll start in standing to that, mountain pose, standing on your mat. Take your time. And once you come to standing, and you could do this sitting also, but once I'll guide us from a standing position. And once you are here, without even looking at your feet, just feel into the feet and feel into the idea of the feet supporting you and being your most important foundation in this moment. So am I standing in a way that feels safe and secure and firm and without lots of need to figure out balance? And then once you know that you are in that position, then go ahead and look at your feet and see what you arrived at. Just to cement the idea, like I can stand with my feet this way. This is a good way to stand. And then when you're ready, bring the arms any amount, either up overhead or maybe out to the sides, but just finding a way to change the shape of your upper body from waist to shoulders by stretching. If the shoulders aren't feeling like lifting the arms all the way up overhead, you can still change shape of the torso by moving in other ways. But if you want to do a full stretch, go for it. Finding that at first voluntary movement where you're directing it. And then if you move into what's called pandiculation, then that stretch sort of takes on sort of a spontaneous way of moving, and parts of your body might just stretch. And then from here, if your arms are up overhead, take left hand in the right and stretch over to the right side. So again, you can do this with lower arms, but reaching and stretching, lengthening out the left side of your body. And just facing forward, simply facing forward. Come back through center, change the grip, and lengthen to the other side. Finding a big stretch on the right side, ribs, waist. Maybe there's a little tug down into the hip and leg. And come back through center. Change the grip so that you're holding on to the left again. Arch over to the right again, finding that stretch on the left side. And this time, let your rib cage turn towards the floor. It's a small movement, but it's like you're turning your back on the ceiling. And the area of stretch might change a little bit. And you can deepen that as much as you want. Play with that. Turn back forward. Come back to upright. Change the grip. And reach over to the other side. So finding the stretch on the right side. Pausing so that when you turn toward the floor, you can feel the stretch move across the back. And then come back up to standing, like face the camera first or face forward first, and then come up to standing and pause. Notice I dropped my little earpiece. Reach the arms up overhead again, arch over to the left. And this time, instead of turning, you'll turn toward the ceiling. So this time you're turning toward the world, right? You're opening up to the world. Turn back forward, come to upright. If you're reaching the arms overhead, go to the other side. So gripping onto the right wrist and reaching to the left. And then from here, turning toward the ceiling. So this is also a very small movement, right? The rib cage has to work pretty hard to turn toward the ceiling when you're in this lateral flexion of the spine. So don't do anything that hurts, just sort of the suggestion of turning toward the world. Face forward and then come all the way to upright. Let your arms dangle. Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. Okay. Take your feet slightly wider than your hips, just slightly wider. Let there be a slight bend in your knees, just a slight bend. And then begin to hinge deeply at the hips. So slight bend in the knees, deep hinge at the hips. And let yourself begin to fold over. So when you get to maybe this spot, you'll start to feel a stretch across the back of your legs. This might be where you want to stay. But you could also keep going by rounding your spine and come all the way into a hanging sort of ragdoll shape. And in that ragdoll shape, let your head dangle, let the arms dangle. Let this be a very soft, dangly, easy shape. From that shape, bring yourself to more of a flat back, like bring yourself out of the curved spine. Let your forearms rest on your thighs. Turn the right foot to the right, left foot slightly to the right, and then climb up to standing. Both legs are straight now. From here, hands to hips. Have the knees soft but not bent, soft, not locked. Hinge at the hips again and bring yourself into a forward fold. You might want to stay right here. There could be a big stretch happening on the back of the front leg. But if you like, you could also round the spine and go for the big it's big. It's a bigger stretch for me on the back of my thigh. It might feel more secluded or more intimate, more, it might feel like less of a stretch, actually. Bend the knee to come all the way up to standing. Turn the toes to face front. Pause. And then let the toes turn toward the left. So left foot turns to the left. Right foot is slightly turned to the left. I'm not locking up my knees. I have a little softness in my knees. Hands to hips, so that guides me to find the hinge of my hips, and I can start to fold over. In this shape where I'm like, we call this flat back. There's a lot of stretch happening here, but it feels very open and exposed. I might change the concept of the pose by going deeper and rounding my spine. It might feel safer. If you go all the way over like this, let the head be soft, the neck and shoulders soft. There's a dangling here also. Climb back up, toes point forward. And then take the feet now a little bit wider, not as wide as you can go, but a little bit wider. And then look down at your feet, bend your knees a little bit. And as you look down, you might be able to see the knees and the toes in alignment with each other or not. And in order to protect your knee, let the knees and the feet work in collaboration with each other. So the toes and the knees are angled in the same direction. From here, fold all the way over. So let yourself hinge at the hips and find how far you want to fold. Do you want to dangle in this shape? Or would it feel better to sort of brace yourself, hands on the thighs? You decide. From this forward fold shape, whether you're far down or level with the ground, let the right foot turn out to the right and keep walking to the right. And the left foot, just because you'll be unbalanced, let the left foot start to turn to the right. So both feet are turning to the right. And we've done this before, I have walked my right foot to the farther side of my mat. So not only am I pretty wide front to back, I'm pretty wide left to right. Bend into the right knee, left leg is straight. And from here, let your shoulders turn toward the right knee. You're turning toward the right knee. And then choose a place for your arms. So to make this like a chest opener, the arms get big and wide. The traditional warrior one shape is arms up overhead. But there's also other versions to do with your arms, and you're still receiving the benefit of this foundational pose, right? This warrior stance of power, whether you want arms or not. Bring arms back to the hips and walk your feet back around, knowing that we're going to go to the other side. So when you turn toward the left side of this pose, adjust your feet so that you are wide left to right as well as front to back. So that meant that I really had to move my right foot. Give you a chance to figure that out. So you're facing the left leg now. And feet are wide left to right as well as front to back. Bend into the left knee. Find your warrior stance. Oh, and I didn't do that. Okay. So in this warrior stance, you can find your arms either reaching up in the traditional warrior one shape, cactus arms. And I didn't do this on the other side, which I meant to. You can Hinge at the hips and start to fold over into a humble warrior. Hands can be dangling, neck can be dangling, or you can rest your hands on your back. I wanted to do this on the other side. So climb back up, and we can quickly do this on the other side if you want. I'm just going to turn back and rearrange my feet using the wall. Bend into the right knee. And instead of reaching into warrior one, I'm just going to go directly into the humble warrior. So folding over my front leg. And here I get to lean on my thigh. I get to check my pedicure. I get to be sort of turned inward to myself. It's almost like a private pose that way. Climb yourself back to upright. Come to facing forward. Take your feet, if you're willing, take your feet a little bit wider. Soften at the knees and bend at the hips and come into this forward fold again. With the feet a little bit wide, letting the knees and the feet be lined up together and fold and stay. In a forward fold. In this forward fold, you can play with the idea of straightening the legs. Depending on how much you bent your legs in order to get into the forward fold, you can play with the idea of straightening one leg, then the other leg. Just feeling into the backs of the legs, those big thigh muscles. Climb yourself all the way back to upright and come to standing 2 feet hip distance apart, roughly. Facing whatever is front for you. Hands to hips. Bring the right foot and cross it over the left foot. And then from here, so notice how when you do this, you jut out the standing hip. So I jut out my left hip. Bring the hips back to level. So it's a balance. Right here, it's a balance. Keep the hips level. Extend the arms. Right arm underneath left. Bend the elbows. Now from here, you can do as much fancy crossing, tangling, twining of the arms as you like. Crossing at the elbows and bending the elbows, bringing the forearms together is where the benefit of the pose is. This is the most important part of the pose. You decide how much twisting you want to do. From here, let the elbows come to up as high as you're willing, your shoulders are willing. And then from here, this might feel a little bit of like a challenge, a balancing challenge. Let the knees be soft. My right knee is definitely bent. Knees are soft. Hinge at the hips and come into a forward fold. So you can stay in this leveled sort of my upper body is parallel to the ground, or you can go a little deeper. That's playing more with balance, trying to fold and round your spine. If you're going into that rounded version, keep your eyes steady as a way to help with the balance. And the arms twisted adds to the challenge, right? Because you don't have your balancing apparatus to keep you upright. Breathe. Bending in the knees just enough to give you leverage to slowly come back through that parallel and back up to standing. Once you get to standing, bring 2 feet together and let your body register 2 feet on the ground again. Of course, we go to the other side, but give the nervous system this moment in time of balance, even, symmetrical, safe, right? And then to go onto the other side, left leg comes over, level the hips. Play with where you want to put your foot so that you can do that level hip situation easily. I'll turn to the side so you can see. Left arm underneath right and bend at the elbows. You decide how much twisting you want to do with the forearms and palms. Let the elbows drift up toward the forehead, up towards the chin, wherever, depends on your arms. And you can stay right here. There's a lot of balance happening right here, especially for me on this side. Soften the knees regardless. If you want a forward fold, hinge it. This happens at the hips. Hinge at the hips. The forward fold comes at the hips. And when you're folding at the hips, your legs are working really hard. Your back should not be working much. Of course, all the muscles of your body are working. If you want to keep going, let the spine round as you come toward the floor, so the pose gets more compact, less exposed. But the challenge of balancing is intensified. Stay in the curled up version or the forward fold version and breathe. Keep your eyes steady. Steady eyes helps. Soften the knees to give yourself some leverage to come out of the shape and move slowly out of the shape. And then let your body come to this 2 feet on the ground standing shape. Come into your favorite version of folding over. So that might have been a real wide-legged, it might be a more narrow-legged, but come into another forward fold. You can even do legs together. Bend at the knees and fold all the way over. Fold so far over that you can now get your hands to the floor. It might mean that you're bending your knees a lot in order to get your hands to the floor. And then once you get your hands to the floor, come all the way to the floor, onto your belly, all the way down to the floor. And then once you're all the way down to the floor, let your forehead come to the floor. So you're all the way down on the floor. So forehead on the floor, and your arms, your elbows are bent so that your hands are about the level of your shoulders, but flip your palms so your palms are facing the ceiling. And from that shape, lift yourself into what is called a cobra pose. So you're not using your arms at all. You're just lifting your head and the upper part of your chest. the hands are not even helping. Like you could take your hands away and you would still be in this shape. Cobra without the arms, smallest cobra ever. And then come back to face down. And then press up to what we call Sphinx pose. So now you're resting on your forearms and your back is much higher. Let your palms also be upright here so that it's a much more passive version of this pose. So Sphinx pose is normally taught with the palms down and you're really pressing the forearm and the hands into the floor. But instead, let this be a passive version so that you're pressing into the forearms to keep your chest upright, but the hands are soft and relaxed. Breathe here and feel into the shape of this pose. There could be a lot of work happening at the back of your hips in the gluteal muscles. Can you release those muscles? Can those muscles not work? Soften the back of the hips. And you decide how broad you want to be across the front of your body, whether you want to be broad and open, or whether you would prefer to be a little bit lower in the shape. You decide. And then come all the way back down to your belly. Take your hands down by your hips. Forehead on the floor. And then from here, lift the head and chest, lift the hands, and lift the legs. So you're sort of flying. There's a little bit of a sense that you're flying. And if you want, you can do a little swimming with your arms, reaching and floating, reaching the arms and floating. And then come all the way down to resting on your belly and breathe. You can turn your head to one side if you like. If your knees don't mind, come to all fours so that you're on your knees and your hands. And move through several rounds of cat-cow. So cow being the version where you lift your tailbone and face and your belly sort of hangs toward the floor. And then the cat being where you lift your spine toward the ceiling like a scared Halloween cat and you drop the hips and you drop the head. And you move back and forth through this full spinal movement. And you might find that as you move in and out of cat-cow, that the breath starts to match up with this movement. And maybe when you move into cow, you're inhaling. And as you move into cat, it might feel like a good time to exhale. And after several rounds of cat-cow, you can do some lateral movement of the spine. Even though we did a lot of lateral movement at the beginning of class, you can do a little bit more here, where you're turning your shoulders face toward the same side hip. So my right hip moving toward my face moving toward my hip. And same thing on the other side. Making an arch, a C shape to the left and a C shape to the right. If your knees are still willing, come all the way down to your forearms and bend your elbows, palms together, Let your hips sink back onto your heels. And take your hands back behind your head. I'll show you. And stay there. Breathing. This is like the full-on curling inward. If you're in a chair, you can do all of that just by curling over your lap. Bring yourself all the way out of that child's pose. And come to lying on your back. And once you're on your back, bring both knees into the chest. And let both knees drop over to the right, shoulders stay facing the ceiling. So knees to the right, shoulders and chest face the ceiling. And let your legs be heavy here. So adjusting the positioning of your feet and knees so that this feels like minimal effort. Shoulders heavy, legs heavy. And then rolling through center and bringing the legs to the other side. So the shoulders continue to face the ceiling, but the knees are dropping over to the other side. If you're in a chair, of course, you can do this by turning the upper body more than the lower body, turning the chest opposite of the knees. And being careful not to pull too hard into the shape. If you're in a chair, you don't have the same advantage to gravity. You could pull yourself too hard into a twist. Let the knees come back to center and pause at center. Knees folded into the body. And from here, if you'd like to move into a happy baby, take the hands between the knees so that the knees drop wide. And you take hold of the inner ankles or shins or knee, wherever your hands land inside the legs. Holding on, rocking maybe side to side, making this happy baby shape something creative and unique to you. Some people like to straighten one leg as they hold the ankle, feeling into the strength and the stretch and the tightness of the thighs. And then pausing, take the feet to the floor. Have the feet, feel into the idea of the feet being hip distance apart, a nice stable foundation, and then lift into a bridge pose. Doesn't have to be a huge bridge pose, but it's the end of class. You decide how big of a bridge. Let the whole chest participate in this bridge pose. Again, deciding If the bridge pose can be, maybe the bridge wants to be smaller, maybe the bridge wants to be broader. How much interaction do you want to have? If you're in a chair, this is an arm strengthening pose, trying to lift the hips off the chair. Come all the way out of the pose. Let your hips come back to the floor. And then decide how you want to spend the next couple of minutes. On your back, on your side, curled up in a ball, covered completely, uncovered, eye pillows, little beanbag weights, maybe a pillow across your belly, pillow across your thighs. And whatever nest you have created, know that that nest is a work in progress and you can move and change and rearrange as much as you need to. This next couple of minutes is unique to you, special for you. And maybe there's a sense of settling into the shape. That snow globe feeling of each little snowflake finding a place to land. And once you feel like you have landed, take the next moment or so to notice your breath. How is the breath responding to the last couple of minutes? Or maybe the breath is responding to the full class, the last 45 minutes. And if it feels appropriate, maybe another round of inhale, pause, exhale, pause, equal 4-part breath. Some people call this box breath, where your inhale, your pause, and your exhale and that pause are all the same count. Inhale, 2, 3, 4. Pause, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 2, 3, 4. Pause, 2, 3, 4. Any version, exploring what would be appropriate for you right now. And then letting go of any special control of your breath and allowing the breath to return to whatever feels natural, whatever breath is just happening without any input from your conscious brain. And just take the next couple of moments to do nothing but rest. Let the body collaborate with gravity. Allowing a sense of turning inward and also allowing any sense of turning outward. Whatever is unique to you today. Let your attention begin to come back to the present moment in the room you're in, feeling into what's happening right here in this moment, feeling the temperature, any sounds nearby. Feeling the quality of light. And then allowing a little bit of movement as you begin to think about how you want to approach the rest of your day, and at the same time also knowing that you could stay exactly as you are and rest for a little bit longer, a lot longer, whatever you need. And I thank you all for practicing.